hi, everybody, and welcome again to the musical Innertube. I, as always, am Don Rooney.
I, as sometimes, am John Timpane.
And John, our guest today is Sweeny Murti, who works for WFAN Radio in New York. Sweeny is knee-deep in sports. We'll go all the way. He's neck-deep in sports, and he's going to talk to us today about baseball and some other topics as well. Good morning, Sweeny.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Pretty good. And thanks for being with us today, Sweeny. Now, there were some anniversaries that came up recently in baseball and in the movie world, and it prompted you to go out and record a little bit of a recap on a baseball movie. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what you did?
Yeah, well, there's part of my TV work is with SNY, which is Sportsnet New York and is the home of the New York Mets, but I also do a lot of Yankees stuff for them. And they have a series they started last year during shutdown called Like We Never Left. It's a takeoff on Josh Gad's very popular series that he does, where he just gathers people, reuniting them through video conference, through Zoom. And that was kind of the theme that SNY hit with their various sports teams. So I've done that with some Yankees things. And one of the things that came up was that I recognized that this was the 20th anniversary of the movie 61, which came out on the 40th anniversary of the season it was celebrating, which was Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle's home run chase in 1961. So now we're talking about 20 years since the movie, 60 years since the season. And I had somewhat of an acquaintance with Billy Crystal. And I thought, boy, if I could figure out how to get the rest of these guys together, it would make a great show. Kind of something a little bit different than, say, gathering people from this particular World Series team or this particular whatever. And jumping through some hoops with some friends I have in Los Angeles, I was able to connect with the actors. Ross Greenberg, who was the executive producer at HBO, was a big help and was all on board. And once I finally got Thomas Jane, who played Mickey Mantle, and Barry Pepper, who played Roger Maris, when I got them committed, Billy Crystal's like, yeah, let's do it. And that became the hardest part for me, was just making sure I contacted everybody and then finding a schedule that would work. And within a week, we had a date that worked. And I got to tell you, I have not been this nervous in a really long time. And like you guys know, like what you kind of doing here is you're kind of jumping through some hoops and making sure everybody is on the same schedule, and technically everything works out so that you can talk to the person you want to talk to. Well, here I have, a couple of a major Hollywood personality, a couple of actors who I have no history with. And a subject that I was really into. The movie 61 is a phenomenal movie that was on HBO in 2001. If it was a theatrical release, it could have gone down alongside Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, and other great baseball movies. So I was pretty nervous to get this thing off the ground and jumping. And once it did, it was being the easiest traffic cop in the world, because I just sat back and let these guys tell some great stories. And the series is called Like We Never Left. It's available online digitally on sny.tv. And it was received well enough that they made room for it on the TV schedule as well on SNY. And that played just a couple of weeks ago in a few different runnings. And we got some nice attention for it. It was really one of the most fun things I've ever did. We spent over an hour on this Zoom call together, and the show itself is about 22 minutes. It was a blast, and those guys had fun. They thanked me afterwards, which was really, great, because, they made this movie 20 years ago, and I don't know when the last time, it was probably 10 years since the last time they all got together in some form to talk about it. And given everything everybody's been through in the last year, I think they all appreciated kind of seeing each other on camera and talking to each other. And I was really happy to make it happen and have them have the kind of reactions that they did.
When I watched it, the thing that struck me, when you get people together and to get them to talk about a movie they've made together, in Hollywood, it's always, everyone is such a genius and it was such a great idea to work together. But this was different. You could really tell that everybody who was connected with that movie really loved it and cherished the time they had together. And I'm wondering if that struck you. It was very moving to see. I know, of course, Billy Crystal, anytime you say the words Mickey Mantle, he gets this faraway look in his eyes. But everybody, even the actors, I mean, there was this real nostalgia for having made something very special together.
I love the idea that they understood right away what I was after. Thomas Jane pops onto the Zoom and he's got a Yankee hat on, something he stole from the set of the movie, and at the end of the show, I asked, my last question to them was, all right, tell me, can you tell me what you guys stole from the movie set? I see Thomas is wearing his hat, and Barry Pepper just reached off camera like 2 feet and pulled out this bat that he had. Now, like, I want to believe that he had it, tucked away somewhere and pulled it out specifically for this, but I also want to believe that he had it sitting right there 2 feet away the entire time for the last 20 years. And this is, and that's how close he was to the subject. And that's how much these guys felt. It was really clear. Sometimes you've got guys who make movies and I don't deal with a lot of Hollywood people, trust me, but things that you read and see, they move from one role to the next, and it's this project to that project. And there are very few roles that maybe stick with somebody for the rest of their lives and kind of become part of it. And these guys, I think, all felt that. And it's one of the great things about doing period pieces and historical pieces where you're playing real people. There's real connections there, real memories. And it was just fun for me as a fan of the movie, as a fan of baseball, and as somebody who's really admired Billy Crystal's career for a long time. And I've had like a handful of interactions with him over the years at baseball games that, it was really kind of neat for me to walk them all through that and see that they got that I got it. It's like they're nodding along to me as I make certain points and questions. Like, that part was really cool.
And I want to say it was very well cast too, because when I was watching Thomas Jane on the special, he was pulling off the same shtick that he did when he was Mantle in the movie. And Barry Pepper was very reserved the way he was when he was playing Roger Maris in the movie.
Yeah, they have part of that personality there, and it was great. And I mean, to me, when I first saw the movie, the biggest thing was, my gosh, how much do these guys actually look like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris?
Oh yeah, Thomas Jane as Mantle was a real great find, I thought.
Phenomenal. Yeah, and Billy Crystal tells a story of how he watched these guys on camera and some previous movies and just saw the resemblance jump out to him. They also tell some great stories about how the family members reacted, seeing, because their wives were still there at production, and Mantle and Maris had passed away, but their families were still around, and to watch these men wearing those uniforms and embody what these guys looked like 40 years earlier was really something fun for to see how the families reacted. I'm sure it was a wave of emotions. We got to talk to some of their family members too. David Mantle, one of Mickey's sons, was supposed to be in, but had a conflict at the last minute and wasn't able to make it. Kevin Maris, one of Roger's sons, was available to us and gave us some perspective on the show too. And you can tell even then, those guys, they became family, they saw Kevin Maris pop up on the screen. Everybody was like, "Hey, Kevin, great to see you." And it was, like I said, I haven't been that nervous for many things that I've done, mostly because there were the personalities that I was dealing with there and how badly I wanted this to turn out well. The idea that they just enjoyed it so much was really fantastic.
Yeah, and I think watching Roger Maris's son in the special sort of portrayed what the family felt about the movie, I think. And that is, I think the family was a little, what are you going to do with my dad?
Mm-hmm.
They were a little off-put at the beginning, but I think eventually they came around to enjoying what Billy Crystal did in the movie.
And even these guys even knew it. I think Thomas Jane says at one point, Mantle's boys started calling him dad. They developed this weird relationship with him, and there's a little extra clip during the credits where you see one of Mantle's sons with one of Mantle's grandsons, and they're kind of they're pretending to be these guys in the stands, and they point out and say, "Look, that's Mickey Mantle," and it's actually relatives of Mickey Mantle, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and the stands are another story. It kind of took me by surprise when Billy Crystal said that Yankee Stadium doesn't look the way it did back in the 60s when Mantle and Maris were playing. So they had to go to what? Tiger Stadium in Detroit?
Yeah. Yeah, Yankee Stadium underwent this huge renovation in the 70s, and the stadium, and that stadium is now bulldozed too, because the Yankees opened the new ballpark altogether in 2009. But in 2000, when they were filming this movie, the original Yankee Stadium was up, but the configuration was completely different because of the renovation that happened in the 70s. So the place where Mantle and Maris and Ruth and Gehrig and everybody in DiMaggio played didn't look anything like it. So they had to kind of recreate it. And, they told the story how, fortunately for them, Tiger Stadium was an old ballpark that had recently become abandoned because the Tigers had built a new stadium. And now you had this old park that had a little bit of that feel to it, and you could make it into your own way because you could play with it any way you wanted. So they painted the seats, they did a lot of things, and then they did some CGI backdrops, which was costly, and 20 years ago it wasn't the same as it is now. So I guess you had to be kind of selective with how you were using it on an HBO budget as opposed to a major studio release budget. So they took an old ballpark, Tiger Stadium, and they made it into what looked like Yankee Stadium, and they made it so convincing that Thomas Jane tells a story. He remembers Yogi Berra walking into the production at Tiger Stadium, and just recognizing the various parts of the old Yankee Stadium, which he hadn't been able to look at in 25 years because the place had not existed. So in that format, in that structure. So he looks around, and the first thing Yogi Berra says, "Yeah, I hit one out over here, I hit one out over there." And to Thomas Jane, he said that's how much he believed that he was in Yankee Stadium. That's how good a job they did of making Tiger Stadium look like it.
There's a lot of really great sports movies. My own opinion as a big baseball fan is that baseball movies are well ahead in the number that have turned out to be real classics. I just think that the ones that stand out, from The Natural to 61 to Bang the Drum Slowly. I mean, I don't know what it is about baseball that makes it good for film and television, but there it does seem to be something. And in 61, Barry Pepper and Thomas Jane, they even get the batting stances correct.
Yeah.
I was so amazed by, Don and I come from the generation that actually went to see these guys play. Don and I went to see Mantle beat the Angels one day, and one of us was thrilled and the other was dejected. But
Old fart.
But, that's the attention to detail that we're working with in this movie. I was so surprised by that.
Yeah, there's a level that they have to do. They have to both imitate and act. And those are kind of two different things. And the physical imitations they made of them were really spectacular. And you could tell that these guys were, really good at their craft. And, it was just a really great movie to see at the time that it came out. And I agree with you. Maybe it's something about the pace of a baseball game that, lends you to kind of be able to tell the story a little bit deeper without having to, have the fast-paced action of other sports kind of distract it. So, and these guys said it. They reckon this wasn't a baseball movie. It was a love story between two men, two brothers, and guys who were going through something together. And there's a bond between them that was the real story of the movie, and it just happened to take place, between baseball players. So that's how they saw it and how they played it.
So, in deference to being delighted and dejected, let's talk about John Timpane, the Yankees baseball fan and the lifelong baseball fan. And we'll talk about somebody else, too. We'll talk about Billy Crystal, a lifelong baseball fan and movies fan. And I think in 61, he managed to marry his love for baseball and his love for movies into the same project.
Yeah, and they, this first came to the attention of Ross Greenberg at HBO, and the first person he called was Billy Crystal and said, "Listen, I think you want to be a part of this somehow." And eventually it came to the part where he said, "Yeah, I'm just going to direct this." And it sounds like that's exactly what Ross wanted Billy to say. He had, but you're right. You said earlier, anytime, you say the word Mickey Mantle around Billy Crystal for the years before that, there was, there were lots of different things. If you go back into, any of his previous things, Mr. Saturday Night is a wonderful movie. And there's a scene there where he's on, like, I guess it's like maybe like the Ed Sullivan Show or something like that. And one of the guests is Mickey Mantle. And you see a guy with a number 7, turned to his back turned, he dropped Mantle into the movie. In City Slickers, he tells a true story of his own childhood about going to see the Yankees play and watching Mickey Mantle hit a ball out of the stadium and still has the program. His connection with them was real, and getting to see it. And like I said, I've had maybe a handful of interactions with him in person over the years. That to me, listen, I was the kid when I was in high school. I was walking around to everybody saying, "You look marvelous," because I was everything I could off of Saturday Night Live and his stand-up stuff. I mean, I was devouring it. So to be able to just talk a little baseball with him every once in a while, and about some of the old routines that I remember, I think he had at least a mild appreciation for what I did. And so when I approached him and said, "Listen, I've got these guys ready to go. Can you commit to doing this?" And he said yes. So it was great. I was most of this happened because I have a little pull on social media, and I have a really good friend in LA who has the right names, phone numbers, and email addresses that can help me get in touch with people. And my friend Jeff Friedman, who I've known for, almost 30 years, really it was a very small contribution, but a large contribution. I would never have gotten it done without his ability to help me find people.
Let's also talk about the fact that it was on Zoom. I don't think you would have been able to get all those people together in one studio in New York or LA and get the same kind of reactions that you got by putting it all on Zoom.
Yeah, well, there wouldn't have been a budget for it, I don't work at a place where I could have gone and said, "Listen, can we fly all these guys into New York?" And no, you're right. It would have never happened. I had 2 guys on the West Coast, 2 guys on the East Coast, another in Florida. It was. I'm in New York, so I think one of the things that's been kind of cool is that we figured out how to use the technology that jumped at us in the last year. Listen, I'm guessing Zoom's been around for a couple of years. I never heard of it until last year. I think we all kind of quickly adapted to, okay, we still have jobs to do, and we still have content we can produce, and we can figure out different ways to do it. And this was, I think, the third in this series, the Like We Never Left series, that I personally have done. The others were Yankee related as well. One was with Tino Martinez and Scott Brocious last summer, where I kind of talked about the 2001 World Series with them, which happened in the wake of terrorist attacks, and just the thoughts and feelings of people around the country and how they rallied around baseball and the Yankees. And, kind of people were kind of trying to bounce back last year from the various things that happened in this country and kind of turn to sports every once in a while. So we kind of made that connection a little bit. And then the other one was just with 3 fun guys from the 2009 Yankees World Championship team, AJ Burnett, Johnny Damon, and Nick Swisher. A lot of these, it's really, listen, I think you guys have been in the business long enough to know that it's really cool when you get to host something, but your main job is to stay out of the way. And
yes,
that's what these projects have all been for me. And the last one especially, there was one moment, and you don't really you do see it sometimes. If you're watching, you see me looking down while the other guys are talking, and my producer is texting me different notes and stuff while it's going on. So I'm looking down at my phone, which is what you see in the thing, and hopefully you understand that I'm still paying attention. I'm just checking notes. But, what is really cool is that he's texting me saying, like, there was one period where I didn't talk for 15 minutes probably. And he's just texting me, this is autopilot. I'm like, yeah, this is great. On the show, it doesn't look like that because they edited it. But that's the fact that, like I said, to me, the hardest part was getting everybody together, because once we got on there, these guys are sitting it's Zoom, but they're sitting in a room together, and you're just in that room with them, listening to them tell their stories. And that's something that 2020 didn't allow us to do very much, and still doesn't to some degree, to a large degree. So to have that technology available to us and figure out how to use it, thanks Josh Gad for showing us how to use that particular thing, because we stole your idea and we loved it.
The thing I want to see is a director's cut of the whole hour. I would just love to see that.
I've got the file. It's tucked away. I haven't watched it yet. I do have the whole hour here. I was actually quite pleased when they decided to air it on regular TV, and they did it right around the anniversary, because April 28th was the anniversary of the movie. And one of the things that was really cool was that I first approached these guys. I guess I started really getting these guys in February, and it came over the course. We taped the first week in March, and so it took a few weeks, maybe a month, to maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, to get these guys all lined up. And we taped the first week in March. And one of the things that really that Billy Crystal really loved was that he had not been approached yet by or told by HBO anything about any plans to celebrate this or talk about this. And while we had, in the time it took for us to set up our thing, he found out that HBO was going to air the movie on the 20th anniversary of its release on April 28th. So that became kind of a tie-in for us. And now listen, I'll take a small piece of credit for it, because I think we started putting the bug in people's ears that, this is a really cool movie, and it came out 20 years ago. So our thing aired in late March online. They aired it on April 28th. And then on April 29th, the next night, our show aired on TV for the first time. And the movie itself, if you have HBO Max, it's available. It streams there if you're a subscriber. And it's going to air again on regular HBO on October 1st, which will be the 60th anniversary of Roger Maris's home run that broke Babe Ruth's record. So, yeah, the idea that, I kind of like that. We saw this date pop up and the potential for it. We're able to make it work, and then HBO kind of pumped it up too. And it's really cool to see that film get some legs here.
Let's broaden the scope of this a little bit now, Sweeny. Let's talk about baseball in general. And it seems to me now baseball's opening up again now with all of the COVID restrictions starting to fall back a little bit. Fans are beginning to come back to the stadiums, but it just seems to me that baseball's been a little bit off lately. I don't know. There's either not enough offense or too much offense, and pitchers are really effective or not effective at all. And I don't know. It just seems a little different. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot to chew on there, Don. But I don't think there's an easy answer. I always come back to there's a great quote, and I wish I knew where it came from, but I've kind of used it a few times. It seems that everyone's idea of what baseball should be like is what it was like when they were 10 years old.
Right.
And so that could change. If you're 30 or if you're 60, that they mean two entirely different things. But when you were 10, that's what you kind of always want baseball to be like. And so I think that's a certain bit of a disconnect when you're looking at how the game changes. You don't want the game to change, but it does. And I think we kind of have to unattach ourselves from some of the the more quote unquote sacred things about the game to make sure it continues, because things are different now. I know a guy that is a longtime former major leaguer, longtime scout that I talk to often. He told me, listen, the game isn't better now. It's not worse now. It's just different now. And it's our jobs to understand that and deal with it. And I thought that was a really good way to look at it. And listen, you got to start tinkering a little bit. And people don't want, for some reason, to tinker with it. Where listen, they've changed the rules in the NFL countless times. With whether it's pass protection or pass interference calls. I mean, they even moved the extra point back. Nobody seems to care, but you talk about moving the mound 6 inches and everyone goes nuts. We've constantly changed the game. In fact, these ballparks are built now. They're not built like they were 50 years ago, 60 years ago. We've changed the dimensions of the game. Because with the fences, what's wrong with moving the mound back a foot and seeing if that makes a difference? Because guys are throwing harder than ever before. It's different. It's harder to hit. It's hard to make adjustments. There are tremendous athletes still playing the sport. Unfortunately, there's a little less of the athleticism to display when you get 14 strikeouts a game.
Yeah, I was just going to say that everybody is swinging so hard that strikeouts have gone way up, which means...
Yeah, and the pitchers are throwing harder. Everybody's got to top out now at 96, 97, 98 miles an hour.
Well, the funny thing, though, about that is that the pace of the game is what a lot of people focus on too. But think about the pace of the game is dictated by the pitcher, right? And what's the pitcher doing right now? He's no longer trying to figure out how to measure himself through 9 innings. He's saying, I'm going to throw every pitch as hard as I can and go as long as I can, because whatever time that is, there's going to be 4 other guys coming in after me who are going to do the exact same thing, throw the ball as hard as they can for as long as they can. So you're not measuring yourself. You're not trying to pace yourself through this. And when there's the time between pitches is a big part of the inactivity, right? Well, what's happening there? You've got a pitcher who's trying to focus every ounce of energy into a pitch, and then he's gathering himself because now I got to throw this pitch as hard as I can. And now I got to throw the next pitch as hard as I can. So it's like the physical exertion of each pitch is causing inactivity between pitches.
Yes.
And it's harder to hit them.
I think that point is a really good point, Sweeney. I've noticed this too, that pitchers have to take a moment between pitches psychologically, like if they don't get a call or if they miss the catcher's mitt, if something went wrong, they have to remember what they were told in the dugout or what's scrawled on that little piece of paper inside their cap. I noticed this.
You're trying to be paranoid about protecting your signs. That's where all this information on where to, what signs to use, what set of signs to use is scribbled inside their cap, and trying to make sure that you stay ahead of that. It's all the game within the game, but with the most exciting plays are a great play in the field or a play at the plate, and you're seeing less of that, and those are the things that you kind of want to see come back into the game. I still like watching the game. There's a lot of great things that happen in the game, but there are times when you get bogged down and say, this could be better.
Yeah, and when it comes to pitchers, there was an article this morning in John's old newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, where Joe Girardi, the manager of the Phillies, was talking about how many guys are getting hit in the face. There have been a couple of those incidents just recently. And he says it's probably because these pitchers are throwing really hard, but they don't have the command.
I think one of the things I've heard hitters talk about is, the idea they get chastised for striking out so much. But I mean, think about what you're dealing with the plate. You're talking about guys who all throw 95 to 100 with breaking pitches. So you've got to gear up for 100 and adjust to a breaking pitch. And that's hard to do for most hitters. You kind of have to sell out for one or the other. And if you guess wrong, well, now you're taking 95 in the face. And that's hard. So I just got this great quote last night from a scout that I was texting with during the Yankees game, and we're talking about pitching mechanics, and the harder you throw, the harder it is to repeat your mechanics and get those right. And he said, velocity destroys mechanics, was what he told me. So what that is, that's about repeating your delivery and knowing where the ball is going. Well, if you're focused on throwing harder and harder each time, it means a little less attention to the detail of where it's going. And, and that's probably to the point of what Girardi is talking about.
I may be in the minority here, but I sort of like the atmosphere of experimentation during the pandemic shortened year last year. I kind of liked, the way that the playoffs were structured. I like the guy on second base after the ninth inning. A lot of people hate it, but I think that
John,
yes,
that sucks. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm wrong.
Just to make it clear, that sucks. Go ahead.
Allow me to break the tie here. Sorry, Don. I enjoy the runner on second base in extra innings because I like the way it spurs the action. Because I've been to games that go 14 innings with nothing happening, and I understand that's part of the beauty of it. But there's nothing happening, and there are a lot of other variables there. You've got guys who throw 3 or 4 scoreless innings to get the game into the 14th inning, and he's now sent to the minors the next day because he can't pitch for 5 days, and they need to make a move. You just got demoted because you did your job too well. If you just gave up a home run on the first pitch, you'd still be in the major league. To the idea of this magical 15-inning game, but think about this in relation to other sports. If you have a double overtime game in the NBA, I'm getting more LeBron James and more Kevin Durant and more of the star players to play in this incredible game, and they might score not 25 or 30, they might score 40 or 45 because the game is going on so long. If you give me an overtime game in the NFL, I get more Tom Brady and more Patrick Mahomes. You give me 13 innings in a Major League Baseball game. This isn't 1963 when I get 16 innings of Warren Spahn. I get guys who are literally the last players on the staff and who will no longer be in the major leagues tomorrow. Literally, these are the guys deciding the game. And I think that's a big distinction. I have no problem with the idea of you've had 3 hours to score runs. And if you can't break the tie, I'm not suggesting, completely radical home run derby type of thing, but I like what the man on second base does to spur the action on and bring the game to a conclusion. We don't want to see endless baseball. We want to see somebody win and somebody lose. Help me get there. That's all.
Yeah, it still sucks, but that's a very good explanation.
Well, the thing I wanted to add is that what I'm noticing, Sweeney, is the man on second base brings back small ball. Now all you have to do is score the guy from second, and now both teams are doing the old 1901 thing where, you see more bunting in extra innings, you see singles, you see, people walking intentionally to get the double play. It suddenly becomes that kind of game.
At times, I see that. It depends on the personnel in the field too, because they can't all get it done. They don't all practice that way. Plus, as we talked about, the way pitchers throw, it's not as easy to bunt 101. Part of the problem too is that as much as we want guys to lay down bunts, the arsenal of the pitchers on the mound is making that a little bit more difficult.
So, Sweeney, are you going back into the office these days?
I am covering home games at Yankee Stadium. The road games I do right from the office that I'm speaking to you from now, in my house. And between internet connection and cable, I have everything I need to watch the game and broadcast. It's not the same as covering a game in person. There are certainly some deficiencies to that. But as long as there's no coverage, like all of our access to players and managers is all over Zoom. And so as long as there's not any access that I'm missing, it's acceptable to just, cover the games this way from the road. There's not any extra advantage to go into the ballpark, but I still go to the ballpark at Yankee Stadium. Our broadcast, originates from there. So, I do radio post game on the Yankees broadcast. So I'll go to the stadium for that. But I'll do the road games right from here in my house.
You had talked earlier about how instrumental baseball was in getting people out of the doldrums following the terrorist bombings in 2001.
Yeah.
Do you think baseball will do the same thing this year now that we're all clawing our way out of the pandemic?
Well, I think one of the key things here, and let me backtrack just a moment, Don. Like, I remember, listen, I was in New York when all that happened, and I covered that World Series, and I made that case. And in the years after, I kind of regretted doing it because there are still so many people who lost family members, and they could care less if the Yankees were in the World Series, right? I mean, it didn't matter to them. But there are people on the flip side of that who've told stories about just bonding over the baseball games and having them. And as the players themselves have told me, they've heard from I mean, I've talked to everybody on the 2001 team about it. They felt a responsibility to the city because they knew they were a distraction. I even got to write a piece about this for the Hall of Fame program about Derek Jeter's home run in that World Series, and Joe Torre and Tino Martinez and Paul O'Neill all talked to me about the idea that they knew that, having talked to people, that there was a distraction that was necessary in the city, and they were providing it. So there was a segment of the population that needed that. The thing that I think, if I think about it now, what it's going to do now, how many other places do you have besides concerts and sporting events where you get tens of thousands of people together in one small place, right? Well, those are the things that are going to make us feel normal again. And as the capacities start to increase, and I mean, I've seen concert dates announced for this summer for various places, and all the different sports venues are rolling out their ticket capacities in larger numbers as we get going here. These are it's the kind of communal events that you want. The first game in New York after 9/11 was a Mets game against the Braves about 10 days later. I think it was September 21st. And there was a large crowd there at Shea Stadium, but it was tense, right? And then Mike Piazza hits this dramatic home run late in the game, and the place goes berserk. And it's this release of energy and emotion that the entire crowd just felt, and it felt normal again. They were cheering a home run. And if there's anything that we're going to get out of this, it's probably that feeling of being normal, of just being around strangers and, not caring as much. I don't know if you're going to be able to flip a switch and have that happen, but if you get 40,000 people into a building and they watch a dramatic moment in a sporting event, they're going to react a certain way, and it's a reaction we have not been able to witness for a long time now.
Well, Sweeney, let's remind people again where they can see your follow-up to the 61 movie, and for that matter, where they can see the 61 movie that Billy Crystal put together.
Yeah, the movie itself, 61, is an HBO film, so it's on the HBO streaming platforms. On TV, it might be on demand, HBO on demand, but HBO streaming now stuff is now on HBO Max, and they have almost all their old movies going back years there, and they're rotating crop of movies as well. So you can just search for 61 on there, and you'll find the actual film. And my show is called Like We Never Left, 61, and that is on sny.tv. And you just kind of have to do a search on there, and you'll be able to find it on that website. But there's a whole series called Like We Never Left that their idea is reuniting sports teams and players, and that's where we did our show.
Well, Sweeney, between the three of us, I think we could talk baseball for days and days and days. Thanks a lot for being on the Innertube, and thanks a lot for talking baseball with us.
Yes, thanks.
All right, guys, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube. You can get in touch with us by email. It's musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. John is @JTimPayne. Don is @DonRooney9. Our webpage is Musical Innertube, that's musical spelled with two A's, .libsyn, spelled LIBSYN.com. Now, the Innertube is available on Amazon Music, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms. And don't forget, you can head on over to musicalinnertubeplayers.libsyn.com to check out some fine radio comedy. And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.